Hello, we are going to go over the parliamentarian training for the UIL State Congressional Debate Tournament. Again, February 14th, 15th in Lavernia. This will be a very quick presentation just to go over with you some of the things that you will need to know about serving as parliamentarian at the state tournament. We'd like to thank you for volunteering or being volunteered to be a parliamentarian for the state tournament. With all that's going on this year, we greatly appreciate it. So just before we get started, I do want to let you know that UIL has set up some pretty good and stringent safety protocols for the state tournament. So if you would, please visit the website that is on your screen so that you can learn about these safety protocols. They are pretty extensive. I don't want to go over all of them with you, but just know that there will be directional signs in the building. You will be required to wear your mask. There will be spacing. They will be releasing, the clerks will be releasing us room by room, row by row to avoid congregation. And that's mainly what we want to do. And we'll talk more about this when we get to recesses and things like that about what you can or should and should not do in regards to safety. One other thing, please bear with me if this recording I start sniffling and coughing. So one other thing, if you have not listed any schools that you may have conflicts with, students you may have taught before, students you may have coached before, students you may have consulted with at a camp, and you have not put those on your form, please contact Jana ASAP so they can get those in. Also, please be aware that the tab room is going to do their best to honor all of these, but sometimes it may be unavoidable and you have to do something and judge some kids that you know. And if that is the case, just make sure that you are as fair and impartial as you possibly can be. So when it comes to the parliamentarian, you just need to look at your job as a guide in the round. You are there to allow the students as much as possible to run the chamber, but in case there are issues where there is a mistake in the procedure, or if there are questions of parliamentary procedure, you are the go-to person in the round. If there are any questions or, let's say, issues, you are the final decision maker on all questions of parliamentary procedure. You are also there to determine if any amendments that are offered are germane, which we will talk more about later. But those are basically the responsibilities. You are there to watch all of the contestants, as you will be ranking all of them at the end of the round, whereas the scorers have to rank just the top 8. The other thing is that you will be using SpeechWire this year to complete your ballots. There was an email sent out about that from the UIL office. If you have not set up your SpeechWire account, please do so before the tournament so we can make sure that you are good to go. The other thing is that you, as the parliamentarian, do not have to score speeches. You do not have to fill out ballots for the speakers. You can fill out PO ballots if you want, but as for the speaker scoring, you do not have to fill out ballots for the individual speakers. You are just there to pay attention. You have other things you need to keep up with besides scoring speeches, so that is not your concern. But you may want to have a piece of paper off to the side to where you are keeping track of how well people speak so that it can come into your ranking when it's all said and done. I know personally that I keep all my stuff on the seating chart. I draw lines and grids all over my chart to keep track of things. So just know, however it is most comfortable for you, that is the way to do it, but you are not required to score speeches. Now, when it comes to starting these sessions, you will, again, as always at UIL, have a clerk in the round with you. They are there as like a secretary, kind of just to help you out and help organize opening and closing the session. All items that you will need will be brought to you by the clerk who is in your room. This is usually a big folder that has a gavel, some stopwatches, pens, and lots of paperwork in there, ballots and things that you need to fill out. When you get into the room, make sure that you go through your folder to pull out any of the forms that you may need. You should probably have in front of you a seating chart, a precedence chart, the table of frequently used motions up and ready to go. Make sure you have a count of the number of people that are in the room so you can make sure that the 2/3 majority is met and you know what those numbers are. But just anything that you need out and ready to go. The clerk will call the chamber to order, take the roll, and confirm the seating chart with you and the scores. The clerk will be responsible for giving out all the placards to the students, and then they will introduce the parliamentarian and the scores to the chamber. The first job that you have as a parliamentarian is, once everybody is seated and ready to go, is to review the session time schedule with the chamber and then to conduct presiding officer auditions. This, again, for some of you may be different than what you're used to, so we're going to go over the presiding officer auditions now. So in your folder, there's going to be an envelope labeled presiding officer auditions, and it will be slips of paper. The PO candidates should have declared, or must have declared, before the round, or before the tournament, excuse me, that they were going to run for PO. Those are your PO candidates, and they will be marked for you. The PO candidates will have a 1-hour performance window. Now, if you are in a position where there is only one PO candidate in your room, you do not have to do this. That hour is just like, okay, we only have one PO candidate. Congratulations, Representative so-and-so, you are the PO for both sessions. Now, in the chance that you have 2 or 3 presiding officer candidates in your room, you will have a 1-hour audition period. This audition period will last no more than 1 hour. The PO candidates will draw for their audition order in that envelope that we talked about. And then they will break up that hour for however many there are. If there are 2 candidates, they will each audition for 30 minutes. If there are 3, they'll get 20 minutes. If there are 4, they'll get 15 minutes, and so forth. I think 4 is probably the max that you possibly could have in any one chamber. And the first, they will draw for order. The first candidate, will set the orders of the day, do what they need to do, get the round started, and audition for their time. Then after their time is over, the next person will go. So make sure you remind each candidate before auditioning that they need to maintain their own precedence and recency chart. It is not the obligation of one candidate to share their chart with later candidates. So if candidate 3 isn't going to start for 30 minutes, candidate 3 needs to keep his own precedence chart. So when it's his time to take the chair, he has his own precedence chart ready to go. Again, as I stated, the first nominees should set the rules of the day. And make sure that you, as the PO, or as a parliamentarian, are carefully timing each nominee's audition time. It is very imperative that they serve roughly the same amount of time. But again, you don't want to interrupt if it's a 30-minute auditioning period and you're at 30 minutes and someone's in the middle of a speech. You don't want to, of course, stop that speech and say, okay, stop your speech. We have to switch out POs. Wait till there's a natural break, and then switch out your POs. I would say after a questioning period before a speech starts. So you would not want to probably stop that in the middle of a questioning period, have a speech, change out POs, and then let questions happen. I would say let a complete block go through before you do that. So after each nominee has done their audition period, and when there is a natural break in the process again, please say, okay, Representative so-and-so, your auditioning period has come to an end. Representative so-and-so, it is now your turn to take the chair. Keep repeating this until all the PO candidates have went through. Once all the nominees have finished, you will ask them all to come to the front of the room in the order that they audition. Please give them each 30 seconds to reintroduce themselves and give a brief campaign speech. I also suggest you have them bring their placards up also so they can, the students will have their names so they can remember them. Then you and the clerk will conduct the vote. You will give each member a voting slip, which will be, again, in your little folder, your binder, your packet, and have them write one selection for PO and then return it to you. You can work out with the clerk how you want to collect these and count them. But please remind the students that any ballot with more than one name or any ballot that is illegible will not be counted. The clerk, again, will help you. And once you count the votes, there has to be a majority. So if you have 3 candidates and no one gets a majority, you will drop the candidate with the lowest number of votes and then rerun the election until one person gets a majority of the votes in a room. So if you have 4 candidates, you'll probably have to run, if there's no majority, you'll have to run with 3. If there's no majority again, you'll have to run it with 2. And so on. But it is just very important that you wait until you get a majority. Now, if you have 4 candidates running and one person gets the majority in the room, you're good to go. You have your first PO done. Now, UIL rules state that the candidate who receives the most votes will have the choice of serving as PO for the morning session or the afternoon session. The other candidate will serve as presiding officer in the other session. So if there's only one candidate, again, that PO will serve all day. If there are 2, the person who gets the most votes will say he will be the presiding officer. He gets to choose morning or afternoon, and the person who got the second number of votes will get the other session. Please remind the students that only members elected in preliminary sessions are able to PO in the final session or even be candidates in the final section. Once the election is completed and the PO assignments are made, please introduce the PO that will be starting out by calling him up. Representatives, please welcome to the chair your presiding officer, representative, whatever. So that's the PO election. This is the first thing that needs to happen when the round starts. And again, everything else that's going on in the round is being scored. The speeches that the students are giving are being scored. The precedence is going to keep going as it is set in the auditioning period. So this is just a way for the presiding officers to show the chamber what they have and let the chamber decide who they want to be their chair. So again, very important that you conduct these as swiftly as possible and as equitable as possible. Once you have your PO set, you're pretty much, that's for the first session, that's pretty much what you got. The PO is now running the chamber. You're only there to step in if there are issues with parliamentary procedure, if they're making a major error, if there's any issues of precedence. You are the final say in the room. So please be firm, but also be fair. If you're unsure about the rules, please make sure you consult the Constitution contest rules before making any final decisions. We'd prefer you to, have to take a minute to look that up than to give them wrong information. So your job after this is just to watch for any errors that may be hard, or I don't know what I just typed there, that may be unfair to members of the chamber. If you have a strong PO, your job's going to be very easy. If your PO is not as knowledgeable, you're going to have to pay closer attention to make sure that they are following everything that is supposed to happen in the correct order, making sure that they are keeping track of the correct, 2/3 majorities, making sure that they are doing the correct what is needed to pass a piece of legislation or pass a motion. And that again is all on the frequently used motions chart that will be in your binder. It is also, remember that the PO does get ranked with the other legislators. So their knowledge of the parliamentary procedure and how efficiently they run the chamber needs to be evaluated. So again, ranking the PO is always something that people, scorers and some parliamentarians get confused about, but just remember, they're not speaking, but they have a job to do. They have certain things that they need to do that you need to make sure that they are doing. And if they do them all well, you should probably consider ranking the PO fairly high. Now, if there's mistakes and issues, again, you will take that into account when you're doing your rankings. This is not a position that needs to be punished. Just because they're not speaking does not mean they're not good and not prepared. It just means that they are, going to lead the chamber and they think that they would be a strong leader. And it is up to you to evaluate that in whatever way that you see fit. So when it comes to your duties during the round, you have 3 things that you really need to keep track of. First, you need to keep track of the number of speeches that are made. Next, the recency of questions that are asked. And then finally, the precedence of student speakers. Precedence is very important in congressional debate, as you know, so you need to make sure that you are keeping accurate of that, just to serve as a check on the PO, but also, if there's any issues, yours is going to come into play. Your chart will come into play. Again, it is up to you how to do this. There will be some precedence charts in your folder. I know that I have my own way of doing it. If you have your own way of doing it that works for you, that's fine. Nobody's going to be checking your notes at the end, but just make sure that you are keeping an accurate count. Again, students who have spoken the least amount of time should receive precedence for speaking in the chamber. For example, if 2 students are ready to give a speech and 1 has not spoken at all, the student with no speeches should be given precedence or be recognized over someone who has already spoken. This is something that POs should be knowledgeable about and should be doing already, but it is something that as the parliamentarian, you need to keep track of and make sure that they are doing in case there are any issues. So questions will be based off of recency also. So make sure that you are doing your best to keep up with questioning. I usually do questions on a separate piece of paper, but again, it is up to you any way that works for you to make sure that this is getting taken care of. When more than one speaker seeks the floor, the presiding officer must follow the precedence recency method. First, recognize students who have not spoken during the session. Next, students who have spoken fewer times, and then students who have spoken earlier, which is recency. On your desk will also be in your folder, and I would go ahead and place them on your desk, will be some amendment forms. If any student wishes to amend a piece of legislation, they can do that in writing on an amendment form and hand it to you. Once you get an amendment form, you need to look at the legislation, look at the amendment form, and then it is up to you as the parliamentarian to decide if the amendment is germane. What we mean by germane is, you need to make sure that the amendment does not change the fundamental basics of the bill. For example, if the bill was to, increase funding to the Space Force, you could not get a piece of an amendment that says we are going to decrease the amount of money given to the Space Force. Now, you could do something along the lines of, we're going to change who distributes the money. We can change the agent of action. You can change the amount of money, but you don't want to change the intent of the legislation. That's very important. The amendment process, please familiarize yourselves with it, because sometimes if there is going to be a mistake with the PO, in my experience, it's usually going to happen during the amendment process. So please look over the amendment process, familiarize yourself with it in case the PO has any questions. But just think of it like this. Once an amendment is, if the amendment is voted on, if the amendment is accepted to begin debate on it, you pretty much are just taking out what's happening in the debate and doing your own little, it's like, just consider it its own little bill within a bill. You have the same thing. You have to have the motion to accept it. Once it's accepted, you have to have a speech to talk about the amendment. And then after there's debate on the amendment, you vote to accept it or deny it. Usually, I will tell you, my experience is usually the amendments get voted on up or down without any speeches given sometimes. That's even better for you. I know that sometimes there are some amendments that happen to where, like, on the last section of a bill, it'll say this bill will take place in January of 2021, and we've already passed January of 2021. Some kids will sometimes make an amendment to change that to 2022. Usually that's something that can be done without a speech and just be done as an amendment on unanimous consent. But again, that's minor. Amendments, I've noticed, are very rare, but when they do happen, it's important that you do know how to handle them. Also, please make sure that the sessions are as close to the schedule as possible. We should keep recesses as short as possible. And this, again, as I stated earlier, is due to both the safety issues and to maximize debate time. We should try to keep these down as little as possible, probably 20 minutes for each session maximum, so we can maximize the debate time and also keep the kids from congregating and keep everybody as safe and Rona free as possible. Please also keep track of the UIL gavel and the stopwatches that are provided in your folder. When session 1 is over, what is happening in session 1 has to be voted on at the end. You cannot carry over legislation into session 2. So if we are 2 speeches into an item and we have 5 minutes left, like, okay, this will be the last speech on this piece of legislation, and then we will break at the end of the session. So please know that after this speech, we will immediately move to the previous question. So you cannot leave a piece of legislation open and pick it up on the next session, because there will be new scorers and a new seating chart. So when session 2 begins, Introduce the new PO. Again, if there's only one PO candidate, that person will still be the PO. In session 2, precedence and recency reset, and a new seating chart will be provided. So the clerk will help you. The clerk will come in and make sure everybody's seated and put them where they're supposed to be. When everybody's there and ready to go, please start as soon as possible to keep us on time. Once session 2 comes to an end, the chamber will vote on the legislation that is there, and that will be it. They will call for the orders of the day. The session will be done. The clerk will release the students row by row, probably. That will be up to the clerk, but just know that you need to wait in that room until you are released. Your ballot will be completed on SpeechWire. It is your responsibility to complete a ballot that ranks all of the representatives in the chamber. Every representative will be ranked on the parliamentarian ballot. So if there are 14 people in your room, you will have a first place and a 14th place. It is very important that you rank every single student. If there is someone on your ballot who did not show up, I would probably rank them last, but make sure you let the tab room know that you did have a no-show. Okay, there's only one, we're good there. Also, make sure that you get the gavel back from the presiding officer, and if they took your stopwatch, please take that back, and then make sure you give the notebook to the clerk at the end of the day. The clerk will take your notebook and the other scorers' ballots to the tab room, and if I remember correctly, UIL wants you to stay in your room until you are released. The clerk will come back and tell you all of your stuff was good, there were no issues, you are good to go. So that is what happens when you're ending the prelim round. Now, at the end of the Super Congress round, which is the second day of finals, if you are a parliamentarian, you will be conducting the vote for the outstanding presiding officer. You will have both the AM and PM presiding officers come to the front of the room with their placards and ask each to remind the chamber of their names and then return to their seats. You will then pass out the little slips of paper and tell the students, excuse me, tell the students to vote for their choice of top presiding officer by writing the name on the voting slip. Again, please remind them that if they vote for more than one person, if you can't read it, or if they vote for someone who did not serve as PO, their vote will not be counted. Again, you and the clerk will count the votes, and do not announce the winner. There will be a ballot or a PO results form in your folder, and please give that to the clerk to take to the tab room, which will be in the auditorium conference room. Again, once that is all done, the round is over. Again, collect the gavel, the notebook, and the stopwatch. Give that to the clerk with the ballots, and well, not, excuse me, the ballots will be on SpeechWire. Sorry, all the papers and folder. Give that to the clerk at the end of the day. There will be some other forms in your folder, such as a sheet to keep time of breaks, a sheet to keep track of the voting record of the session. So those are the, when I say ballots, those are the forms that you will be giving back to the clerk to take to the tab room. You will have your ballot on SpeechWire. Now, very important, some things to know here. During the regional competition, there were some district and regional waivers that were given. These waivers allowed for some rule changes due to some schools being in the online format. Those virtual waivers are not in effect for the state tournament. That means there will be no direct questioning in person. The students will be back to the, you get one question per, the one question, then move on, one question, then move on during the questioning times. It is not a direct questioning situation. So please make sure the students are aware of that before you start. Also, there is no internet access allowed during the rounds. This again is, some students are used to this due to TFA rules and also due to the waivers that were given out in the fall. So make sure that students are aware no internet access is allowed. Any computers must be on airplane mode throughout the round. Cell phones and smartwatches should also be set to airplane mode. The rules for the waivers are not in effect. The rules are back to what they are for UIL state competition. So no direct questioning, no internet access, cell phones on airplane mode. Make sure that these rules are very clearly spelled out before the beginning of the round. Here are some other things you just need to be aware of. I'm almost done, guys. Reverse precedence is not allowed. Watch for time abuses. 3 minutes is the maximum time for speeches. Please make sure that the PO is keeping accurate time for all speakers. There has been some times where some POs have tried to maybe pad a second here or there. Please make sure that you are checking with that. And if you see continued abuses of this, please make sure you pull the PO to the side and let them know that you have been keeping track of this and this is not permissible. I don't time every speech, but I do spot check every now and then the PO just to make sure that they are being fair. Again, it is not recommended to take breaks after each bill or resolution. We want to try to keep the recesses down to 20 minutes per session. And please keep track of the breaks in the form that we provided in your binder. This is also, again, to keep debate moving as fast as possible, get as much debate in, and also to keep the kids from congregating and spreading any diseases, germs, COVID, all that fun stuff. As a parliamentarian, if you are not super familiar with all the rules, it is perfectly advisable and perfectly, it's advisable and perfectly acceptable for you to have access either pulled up on your laptop or on your cell phone, or even print out a copy of the Constitution and Contest rules in case you need to refer to it for any rule checks or any problems during the session that may occur. So please have access to that if needed. Now, something that sometimes happens at the state tournament was where the PO will be, POing, and then they would like to speak on a piece of legislation, and the PO will seek to relinquish the chair. This does occasionally happen, and it is allowed by the rules. So if a PO wants to speak on a piece of legislation, they are allowed to relinquish the chair to another student, provided the following conditions. First, once they relinquish the chair, the PO is not allowed to reclaim the gavel position, the gavel or the chair, until debate on this piece of legislation is complete and a vote is taken. The person who the PO relinquishes the chair to will be the PO in effect until the end of that piece of legislation and a vote is taken. Then the PO can go back to his duties. That is, after a vote is taken, the PO can be reinstated as the chair. Now, again, this is something that happens very rarely, but if you do come across it, it is permissible. This is the process that you will follow, and it can be anybody in the room. So the student will be picking someone to serve as PO for the rest of the session, and hopefully that will not slow you down, and the PO that they select will know what they're doing. So just a couple of common questions that we get every year. So let's just go over those real fast. Are amendment speeches scored? Yes, if there is a speech given on an amendment, it is scored and it does count in precedence. So make sure that you are aware of that. When it comes to authorship or sponsorship speeches, if there is a school in the chamber that actually wrote the legislation, they get the authorship speech. Now, if there is no author in there, the sponsorship will go to a member of that educational service center region who is in the chamber. If there is no author school present and there is nobody from the authoring ESC in the chamber, then it goes off of whoever is up next on precedence that is wanting to speak on that piece of legislation. If there are questioners that are still, or excuse me, if there are speakers still wanting to speak on a piece of legislation and the previous question is called, can the PO consider that previous question even though there are people still wanting to speak? Yes, this is up to the chamber to vote. This is one of the interesting things about Congress. So if there are two people wanting to speak and someone gets in a previous question in the break between speakers and that vote is seconded, that vote is legal. If the students vote to keep going, then those two students just do not get to give their speech on that piece of legislation. Now, usually what will happen is that somebody will make that motion to previous question, and someone will point out a point of order. There were still people wanting to speak, and sometimes the person making the motion will rescind it, but sometimes they will not, and it will be up to the chamber to vote. If the chamber votes down the motion to move to previous question, then debate continues. But if the chamber does vote to move on to the previous question, then we move on to the previous question, and those students that were wishing to speak will have to wait until the next piece of legislation. It is sometimes used as a tactic, you know, as some kind of way to gain an advantage and maybe keep someone from speaking who may have a good speech. So just know that it is gamesmanship, but it is allowed. The only thing that they cannot do is you are never allowed to interrupt a speaker to make a previous question motion. Are the chambers open? No, the chambers are closed. So students cannot just walk in and out as they wish. They need to ask for permission to leave the chamber and ask for permission to enter the chamber. So this again will keep, you know, congregation to a minimum, and also make sure that there is order in the chamber. So please make sure that the POs know that the chambers are closed. Now, also, this sometimes happens is that students will try to suspend the rules to skirt some of the UIL rules that they may not like. This is not allowed. They are not allowed to suspend the rules to move to direct questioning or to, you know, give someone extra questioning time or anything like that. So anytime you hear a motion to suspend the rules, pretty much know that that is most likely 99% of the time going to be not allowed. So that's basically all the information I needed to give to you. There is more detailed information about safety procedures, about the chart of motions again is online if you need that. Any forms that you may need will be in the folder for sure, but if you want to familiarize yourself with some of these forms and some of the procedures before the tournament, these are on the UIL Congress website. So please check that out. All the information that you need is on there. There's a copy of the Constitution and Contest Rules, the frequently used motions ballots, the parliamentarian scoring form, the motion, the recency chart. But again, all of this will be provided to you in paper copies when you get there. Make sure, again, you have your SpeechWire account. If you have any specific questions before the contest, please don't hesitate to email me. My email is there on the screen, and I will either answer your question or get the answer for you. Of course, Jana is always available for questions. But again, that's just some of the information that we run into, some things you need to know. Again, your job is to make the round go as smooth as possible and to make sure that the PO is doing their job. So here's to hoping you have a good presiding officer that makes your job easy, and good luck. Thank you for serving as a parliamentarian, and thank you for your attention during this presentation.